In May 2026, South Korea's data protection regulator closed a case that most coverage filed under a familiar heading, another government data breach. The Personal Information Protection Commission reached its decision at a plenary on May 27 and announced it the next day. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety, which runs Government 24, the country's integrated public services portal, was fined roughly 273 million won over a series of failures on the platform. The headline reading is correct. It is also incomplete. And the gap between those two readings is the whole point. Government 24 is where Korean citizens request civil services and receive official documents online, residence records, school transcripts, tax certificates, identity status lookups, and interagency document flows. It is not a place that shows information. It is a place that issues it. The regulator found several distinct failures, spread across more than a year. In April 2024, a source code error in the issuance flow for Education Ministry documents and tax certificates exposed the personal data of 1,233 people to the wrong recipients, names, dates of birth, school records, and, in the tax certificate path, the resident registration numbers of corporate representatives. The code change behind the tax certificate path had been tested for the individual issuance case. The corporate issuance case was left untested before it went live. In May 2025, an authentication module weakness in the resident ID status lookup service led a handful of records surface to the wrong party. The weakness had not been found and fixed. A file from an internal work board, a list of public parking lot managers, became visible through ordinary Google search. A processor handling related work stored roughly 570,000 records on a server reachable from outside, where it was eventually compromised. Each of these can be described as a security or privacy lapse. Each is real. But describing them only that way misses what they have in common. The standard account writes itself, data leaked, testing was insufficient, an authentication flaw went unpatched, processor oversight was weak, breach notification was late. All true. All familiar. Security specialists, privacy officers, public administration experts, and process engineers can each say a version of it. That is exactly why it is the wrong place to stop. When an explanation is available to everyone, it rarely names the thing that actually failed. In a modern administrative system, data is rarely just data. It is bound to authority, to current status, to eligibility, and to documents that carry legal effect. The moment such data is released, something more than exposure happens, an action opens. A document issues. A status becomes visible. A record acquires consequence. Seen that way, the Government 24 failures stop looking like 5 separate lapses and start looking like one repeated failure with several faces. A code path that opened without ever being verified. The corporate issuance path went live tested only for the individual case. The system was perfectly willing to open an output, a legally meaningful document, under a condition that had never been checked. The defect was not a bug in the code. It was that an execution opened without its conditions being verified at the moment it opened. Authority asked at the wrong time. The status lookup weakness is usually described as an authentication flaw. But the deeper question it raises is not was this data protected? It is, was this party, at this moment, eligible to make this status visible? Authority that was assumed from an earlier step is not the same as authority that still holds when the action opens. Internal state crossing, silently, into an executable surface. An internal workboard file reaching public search is the clearest case of all. Nothing was leaked in the dramatic sense. Internal state simply became externally reachable, externally executable, with no point in the system asking whether it was allowed to. Assumed state versus present state. A processor storing hundreds of thousands of records on a reachable server is the same failure once more. The assumed state, this is contained, diverged from the present state, this is reachable, and nothing rechecked the difference before consequence arrived. There is a single distinction underneath all of it. Access governance asks who can see the data. Execution governance asks when data is allowed to become action, status, document, or authority. Government 24 governed access reasonably well most of the time. What it lacked was a discipline of governing the opening, the moment internal data turns into an externally executable output, under whatever conditions actually hold right then. It is tempting to read this as a story about one portal, or about public sector IT. It is not. The same shape appears wherever data is tied to authority, state, eligibility, and action. In banking, when a payment or a transfer opens. In insurance, when an underwriting or claims decision commits. In healthcare, when a record issues or a status is confirmed. In enterprise SaaS, when an admin console grants, changes, or reveals. In all of these, the controls that get the most attention sit at access and at detection. Far less attention sits at the execution boundary, the instant where a request, having passed earlier checks, actually opens into consequence. That boundary is where Government 24 failed, repeatedly, in different costumes. This was not an AI incident. No model was involved. But it is precisely the failure mode that AI agents will amplify, because agents do not merely read systems. They trigger them. An agent connected to enterprise tooling does not stop at retrieving a record, it submits, approves, issues, changes, schedules, escalates. It lives on the execution surface. So the right way to read Government 24 is not to retrofit an AI angle onto it. It is to treat it as a clean, AI-free demonstration of the exact problem agentic systems will make sharper. If a conventional portal can let internal state become externally executable through a code path no one tested, what happens when an agent is given the same execution surfaces, at machine speed, across far more actions than any review process was built to watch? Patching the specific bugs is necessary. It is also not the durable answer, because the bugs were never the category of the problem. The category was that executions opened without anyone asking, at the opening moment, whether the current authority, the current state, and the current conditions still supported them. The governance question organizations have been answering is, who is allowed to access this? The question they have mostly not been answering is the one Government 24 just paid for. Who, or what, is allowed to cause internal state to become externally executable, and does the current state still support that opening at the moment it happens? That is the question I work on, under the name Foresight Oversight, Execution Governance for AI-Driven Actions. Government 24 belongs in this series not because it is exotic, but because it is ordinary, an everyday administrative system that did almost everything right except govern the moment things opened. The fine will be paid. The bugs will be fixed. The pattern, left unnamed, will recur, in a bank, an insurer, a hospital, or an agent, until the boundary that actually failed is the one we decide to govern.